Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar, A Marketer's Guide to Digital Dashboards. My name is Michelle Versteeg. I'm Head of Marketing for Cardinal Path and will serve as moderator for our session today. It's been a couple of years since our last webinar on dashboards, and we've continued to expand our expertise in delivering dashboards that add business value for clients, and we'll be sharing some of these stories with you today. When you registered for this webinar, we asked you to tell us about your dashboard challenges, and we received an enormous response. It would appear that for many organizations, even those with sophisticated tools and practices, getting the right data, and more importantly, the insights to the right people at the right time, still poses a real challenge. And as you can see atop this word cloud of your responses, getting insights is something many are still struggling with. Add to that multiple stakeholders, various data sources, and ensuring that the data and insights are actionable. And it's no wonder marketers are challenged to deliver on the promise of dashboards. So we've taken many of your questions and we'll pose these to our presenters later in the session, but feel free to submit questions throughout the webinar and we'll get to as many as we can in the live presentation. We will answer all of your questions, though some of them may be answered via email just after the webinar. And just so you know, we are recording this session and everyone who registered will get an email with a link to the on-demand version. I'll introduce our presenters. Charlotte Bourne heads up a team of data scientists here at Cardinal Path and works with enterprise clients to enable digital intelligence. She's extremely passionate about data visualization, as you are about to discover. Mark Tallman is a consultant on Cardinal Path's Analytics and Insights team. His background in sociology combined with his education in digital analytics helps Mark to deploy dashboards that people love to use. And Stefan Hamel, our good friend and a true thought leader in the data and analytics space, is joining us as a special guest today, which is great news because he knows a thing or two about how to deliver a meaningful dashboard. And before I hand over to Stefan to start us off, a quick polling question for you. The question is, who are your dashboard users or intended users if you don't have a dashboard yet? Is it for C-suite, executive level, marketing users, or business stakeholders across the enterprise? Take a moment to check all that apply, and we'll give it a few seconds to compile results. And in the meantime, Stefan, I will hand over to you.
Thank you, and first, thank you for having me today. It's always a great pleasure to share my thoughts and answer a few interesting challenges, right? Interesting questions that we might have. Okay, so the results from our quick poll are in, and maybe not surprisingly, number one is marketing. That's not really a big surprise because typically most of digital analysts are very, very closely involved with marketing. So that's not really a big surprise, and we have executive level interesting in business users. I think I'm not really surprised by those results, and we'll see in the next couple of slides how this is going to impact the way that we address who's going to be consuming or using those dashboards and how it's going to be done. So the first topic that we're going to talk about is related to the strategic alignment. And Google introduced recently Data Studio, and as part of their presentation, I slightly modified the content of that slide, but roughly speaking, they present a workflow that is, I think, fairly interesting and accurate, which is starting by connecting the data. How did you acquire the right data? And in the introduction, we heard about the right data at the right time for the right people. So where the data is coming from, how you collect them, how you clean it, how you maybe sometimes you need to transform it in the right format and integrate multiple data sources. So the connection aspect is probably the first step that you need to do. And then comes the visualization. It's how you're going to present that information, how you're going to create the visuals, how you're going to, what will enable your users, whichever they might be, to use the dashboard that you're presenting. It doesn't really matter if it's PowerPoint or PDF document, Excel, or Tableau, Data Studio, and so on. The concept is always the same. You're going to visualize, you're going to present your information. And then the sharing aspect is, I think, is also very important because you want to give your business users, your stakeholders, a way to interact and give feedback on those numbers. And of course, there's a difference between just sending those dashboards and giving access to the dashboards versus presenting in front of an audience where there can be more direct interaction about those results. So the sharing and collaboration is fundamental in the concept of creating dashboards. You want people to engage with it. So this makes sense, but I think something is missing. What is missing? What comes before? How do you plan your dashboard? How do you decide who is the audience? And that was the first question we asked, right? Who's the audience for your dashboard? Because that's going to drive very drastically how you're going to solve this problem. And I would like to just quote Stephen Few, who's pretty well known. Is a well-known person in the area of dashboarding and visualization. And he defines the dashboard as being a visual display of the most important information needed to achieve one or more objectives, consolidated and arranged on a single screen so the information can be monitored at a glance. So that's his definition of what is a dashboard. So to design effective dashboard or report, it's not very different from developing a website. And I like to use the investigating approach or journalist approach of asking the 5 W's plus 1 H. So let's see first, who is the audience? Who are the stakeholders? What are their needs and desires? What do they want to know? What is going to be the frequency of updates? What is their level of expertise? Are they very, I would say, junior in using dashboards, or are they really sophisticated users that would like to go and slice and dice the data on their own? That's going to drive the way you're going to address it. And I think we can, roughly say that there's 3 different types of dashboard. There's the strategic dashboard, the information that goes at the executive level. There's the more analytical approach to the dashboard, where maybe your marketer wants to have a little deeper insight about what's going on. And then there's the operational, the very, very tactical information that can go in a dashboard because you want to have on a daily basis, on a frequent access perspective, you want to have access to that information that is critical to make quick decisions on a daily basis. This is going to drive also how you're going to do it. Then the next question we want to ask, after who's going to be the audience, is why do they need that information? What are they going to do with it? Of course, we can think of, oh yes, we want a single source of information or a single source of truth. We want to save time. We want to understand the performance of this specific area of the business. We want to align with the organizational strategy. We want to develop a data-driven culture. But why do they need that information? What is the decision they're going to make with it? If there's no decision, there's no dashboard. If there's no, people should know when something goes up or down, how it's going to affect them. If it doesn't affect them, it doesn't belong on the dashboard. So why do they need that information? Next is what kind of information needs to be presented? Which KPIs are going to go there? And when we say KPIs, usually KPIs are not standing on their own. They are supported. They are usually presented with supporting metrics. So it's not only a number, it's also providing the context by, just like we see in this example where, yes, we do have numbers, but we also have an indication of up or down. We have trending. We have different visuals that come and support those KPIs. The question is, how do you decide which KPIs you want to show? Is it going to be an operational dashboard, a strategic or executive dashboard, like I mentioned. I think finding the right KPIs if you ask what are the right KPIs when comes the time to build a dashboard, I think you started at the wrong place. Thinking about the KPIs is something that should be done very early on when you think about your objectives. And people have heard me talking about SMART objectives before, and the whole concept of using critical to quality approach to identify what's the objective, what will support or drive those objectives, and the critical to quality are what are the exact metrics that are indications of supporting that goal that we have defined early on in our analytics process. So it should be obvious what goes on the dashboard if you've addressed the business objective early on in the process. If not, my recommendation is maybe leading to the next point is how is it going to be enabled? How will what will be the supporting technology to present that information? Is it going to be directly in Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics? Is it going to be the new Data Studio, Tableau maybe, or one of the specialized vendors? So what will support that? Which technology? And again, if you have asked the right question to start with, you will know if your audience needs to interact with those dashboards. Do they need to segment on the fly? Or is it going to be more static information and the frequency in all those aspects? So generally speaking, how many KPIs you should get on the dashboard besides the notion of having a single screen is I would say typically 5 plus or minus 2, and if you do the research, you will find why it's 5 plus or minus 2 with their supporting metrics. So that should pretty much fill out your dashboard for a single page. And then once we know how we're going to enable it, the next question is when will updates happen? You know, is it going to be, do you really need a real-time dashboard? Is it going to be monthly? Is it, and this again will drive also how it's going to be enabled, because some tools and some solutions, if you do dashboards in Excel and distribute through PDF documents and things like that, it's very, very time consuming, and it's error prone because you end up with multiple sources of the truth. While if you use something like Tableau, people can access directly. It's a little bit more expensive maybe, it's a little more complex, but it will empower your business users to more easily consume the data they need. So all of that, I would summarize it by, yes, you need to ask those 5+1 questions, just like when you do analysis, it's no different. And if you're able to provide, to answer all of those questions, building the dashboard and planning the dashboard is going to be a lot easier. And then defining the KPIs, finding out what needs to go on the dashboard is something that should have been thought about early on in the process. And finally, you know, aim for 5 plus or minus 2 KPIs to start with, and that's going to be plenty, and that's going to be enough to start with.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for that, Stefan. It's really great to hear about the strategic side of the dashboards, but now I'm going to bring us into the more technical side. Data governance and quality is not necessarily the most sexy sounding topic, but it's going to make or break whether your dashboards end up working or not. And when you're thinking about who the end dashboard users are, they're going to be, no matter who they are, they're going to be curious about making sure that they believe in the data. So I actually do have a story for you, and it's around believing in the data. And it might sound really simple. Why wouldn't you believe in your data? You know, someone does something, we collect data on it. It makes sense. But we did have a client that we were working with, and they were spending hours every week creating a dashboard for their marketing activities. And they would take it to their executive team, and have an hour-long meeting to go over it. But what they found is that instead of discussing the fabulous insights they discovered, the executives would just tear apart the quality of the data. Where is it coming from? Is this valid? Do we trust it? So number one is you need everyone involved, whether they're the executives, the marketing team, business users, they need to believe in the data. So one way to kind of accomplish that is to avoid haphazard data collection. There are a number of standard techniques you can apply to make sure that everything is consistent, because if you're collecting a little bit from here, a little bit from there, people might not believe in the data and you end up back at square one. No one's gaining insight from it. So making sure that you avoid haphazard data collection is key to success. And finally, avoiding band-aid solutions. If you're collecting data haphazardly, you don't really have a process to it, you're going to have to use a band-aid solution. And are you going to believe in that data if you're just putting a band-aid on it? Probably not. So all three of these together lead up to the same point, which is, believe in the data. You want to have a structured process to avoid haphazard data collection, and it'll save you from the time, effort, and stress of having to use a band-aid solution later on. So what does this all mean? When we're talking about data governance, what we're really talking about is standardizing your data. That's both within and across channels. So for example, within your paid social media campaign tagging, and then across different social media channels. But also within and across websites. So if you have multiple websites, you want your tagging to be the same so you can report on your activity overall, and across all of your systems in general. So whether it's your CRM, your email system, your database, or your web analytics, you want all of your systems to be aligned and standardized. And what this is going to let you do is really make the most value of your data. It's going to enable you to join your data later on, so combining two different data sources, or just widen an existing one. So it's going to allow you a lot more power with your dashboards, and getting back to that haphazard data collection piece, it's going to really allow your audience to believe in your data. Now, there are a number of tools we can use, technological tools, to make sure that this happens. And the number one, for me at least, is having a campaign tagging standard. So whether you're marketing across email, paid social media, paid search, anything where you can tag a link, using a campaign tagging standard is going to really help you out in organizing everything. This can be done in a couple different ways. We at Cardinal Path use a campaign tagging spreadsheet that we've generated, and this is actually available on our website for free if you do want to use it, but you don't have to. You can build your own as well. But having a single source of truth for all of your campaign tagging across all of your channels and systems really going to help you out. When you're thinking about websites, having a tag management system, whether it's Google's Google Tag Manager, Adobe's Dynamic Tag Manager, or Telium or another third-party platform, having a tag management system in place to ensure that every single piece of data coming into your website, tracking all the behavior, is going to be standardized. That's really going to help you out when you're wanting to standardize your website. And even within both of these, having a set tagging logic is really important. So whether it's having the date, for example, appended onto each campaign, or using lowercase only, there are a number of ways you can use a structured tagging logic to ensure that all of your tags, whether it's on your campaigns or your websites, stay standardized. And finally, using taxonomy specifications is a great way to ensure that your website pages overall are consistent. So from an example from Adobe Analytics, making sure that your URLs are mapping onto friendly URLs in a consistent way. And that's going to help you later on when you want to use the data because you'll have a standard way that you pull it all in. Now, I've talked about the technical side of it, but it is important to think about the organizational side of it as well. And we always recommend using a digital analytics center of excellence. And this is typically a committee within an organization made up of both executive level and on-the-ground frontline marketing folks to really set the standard for the organization. So you can have the tools, but if you don't have people leading the charge, no one's going to use them. So a couple of things that these folks will do is they'll create those standards. They'll create company policies on how to use those standards and guidelines. They will train staff on how to use that campaign tagging tool or how to standardize it. And if people need help, there'll be the support that's there. So this is really a critical aspect of maintaining high-quality data so that your dashboard data is believed. Because if you have a group from the C-suite down to the on-the-ground folks, it'll make sure that every interest is represented, everyone's voice is heard, and that people actually use it. So if you want adoption and growth, it's very, very important to use a digital center of excellence. So let's go into a case study. We've talked a little bit about understanding your data, and we worked with a major auto parts company, and they had a problem. And this problem was haphazard data collection. They had very specific geographic, campaign, and time-based slices that their executives needed to see, but they couldn't really compare that between all the agencies they used, their in-house teams. They couldn't compare performance and give it context, which was obviously a problem. So we helped them by augmenting that data, making it standardized, and creating a dashboard to slice it by geographic region, brand, service types, time segments, and things like that. Now, it's important to note that we did use a bunch of technology with this, whether it was Tableau to visualize it, Adobe Analytics, Kenshu, Marchex to provide the data sources, but it was really the strategic element of standardizing the data and shaping into standardized tags that really made this work.
Thank you so much, Mark. We have another poll question for the audience as we switch topics from data governance to dashboard execution. And that topic is, how long do you spend producing your dashboard each month? Are you working with a totally automated solution? Are you spending a few hours each month doing your dashboards? Or are you maybe putting in at least a business day? So just wait a moment as the dashboard metrics start coming in. This is a topic I'm always really interested in. Whenever I start on a existing dashboarding project, this would be one of the first things I look at, just because it's usually an area that can always be improved. So it looks like the numbers are just starting to stabilize, and we'll share the poll results. And we got a group of people, about a third of the audience sitting in at 2 to 5 hours, not bad. We do have about a quarter of the audience doing 10 plus hours, which is that's definitely a time investment in getting that out the door. So in terms of dashboard execution, to help frame up the topic of dashboard execution, it helps to understand why dashboards fail. We undertook a dashboard inventory project at Cardinal Path this year, and we polled everyone who works at the company in both Canada and the US, and we said, have you done a dashboard project for one of your clients this year? Is that dashboard still in use? And if it's not in use, why not? These were the common reasons that we came across why the dashboards were no longer in use. So the first one here, it is the website was updated, but the dashboard was not. And this problem really clearly ties back to some of Mark's previous comments about the need for a consistent taxonomy. Just because your site changes probably doesn't mean your KPIs are changing, and it also doesn't mean that your metrics and dimensions, they don't need to be mapped to a new place in your analytics platform. So if you can maintain a consistent analytics structure, it means maintaining the dashboard through website changes becomes more efficient. The second and third point on this slide, they both map to the same underlying concern. It relates to a mismatch between the needs of the business and the capabilities of the technology. And this really speaks to the necessity of carefully evaluating your technology just to make sure you've got the correct solution in place. And finally, and this is my favorite point because I think it's really, really important, is that the dashboard takes more time and work to update than value it provides. And this is one I see all the time. I would really much rather put extra effort into the dashboard creation process to make sure that the dashboard has a very efficient design. I want a dashboard to be easy to update just because it gives more time for insights and analysis. So one thing you can do to improve on your dashboard execution time would be to put a lot of thought into the dashboard data model, I'm calling it, effectively how you're pulling data into the different visualization tools that you're going to be using. And you have a couple of different options here. The first on this diagram would be where you just rely on the in-platform capabilities of your data source to provide you with updated reports. The second one is when you need some additional ability to customize your visualizations, or maybe you're starting to use more than one data source. So this would be where you plug your data source directly into a specialized data visualization tool. Third one, most complex, and this is where you are putting your data into a database or data warehouse and then plugging the dashboarding tool in on top of that. So here's an example of the first model. On the left, you're looking at a fairly standard Google Analytics dashboard, and on the right, one for Adobe Analytics. And these are dashboards that you can create within the platform themselves, and you customize them with the KPIs that matter most for your stakeholders. If you're looking for an easy initial way to get a dashboard out the door, this one can really work well, and it's obviously easy to update because you don't need to update it. It's connected to the information in the analytics platforms automatically. But if you're starting to needing to join data sources, or if you need to customize these visualizations, because some of these widgets are a bit limited in their functionality, or maybe you need an analysis and a commentary layer on your dashboard, then these tools are going to be too limited for you. As your data visualization requirements increase, you're going to need to move to a specialized dashboarding and visualization tool. On the diagram here, you're looking at the Gartner Magic Quadrant that compares different visualization tools. And you'll see the leaders in this space are considered to be Tableau, ClickView, and Microsoft BI. But before you pick your tool, you're going to need to do a vendor evaluation to understand the cost and capabilities of each tool. One thing to also consider here is the data model. How are you going to move the data in and out of these platforms? If you can get a dashboard tool that connects direct to your data source, it'll help to save you time in terms of your dashboard execution. So if we're just thinking through on the web analytics side, all three of the Gartner visualization tool leaders here have native connectors to Google Analytics, which makes porting in the data pretty easy to do. You'll want to keep in mind, though, for example, if you're using Google Analytics API, which API do you need to access? Because not all data comes from the same place. So, for example, if you needed to use multi-channel funnel information, that's going to come from a different API endpoint, and not all of these tools have that endpoint connection. For the other web analytics platforms, it's a bit harder to find native connectors for them. Those Tableau market leaders, only ClickView maintains a connection to Adobe Analytics, and only Microsoft BI has a direct connection to WebTrends, which is currently in a beta. So if your stakeholders have more complex dashboarding requirements, you are going to be in a situation where you need to join data from across multiple data sources. Perhaps you're going to have things coming from an advertising platform, maybe you're looking at your clickstream data, maybe you're using business intelligence, or all three. Different data visualization tools here can handle some joins and some data cleaning, but you will probably reach a point if you're starting to get really complex data structures where it's going to make more sense to combine and clean your data sources from outside the visualization tool. So this would be an example of what that kind of data model would look like. So this would be where you're obtaining your data from the different data sources, running it through some sort of extract, transform, and load step, and then connecting that clean master data source into the data visualization tool. And what you're doing is using specialized tools to manage the data joins and the cleaning, and then letting the visualization tool do what it's best at, which is visualizing your data. A related model to this would be where you follow the same process, but you're using a database or data mart to actually store the data. And this will give you a place to connect your data visualization tool, but it will also give you a centralized place to house your information if you ever needed to run some type of ad hoc analysis across multiple data sets. We use this model on a couple of clients right now. The way we have it set up is that we're creating scripts in R or Python to connect to the various APIs. Those scripts will transform the data as we need it to or join it as we need it to, and then they also will then write automatically to a database. What we're doing is really focusing on the automation steps. So the scripts are scheduled to run as cron jobs. They're executed on a regular scheduled frequency. This updates the database with current information, and then when you need to update your dashboard, the data is available to you. So as you're thinking through the different models of how you can connect your data to your dashboards, which of these models you're going to choose is going to depend on a couple of different things. The first one is data size. So Mark had mentioned during his part of the presentation about a dashboard project we did for an auto part company's SEM data. And for that project, we were adding on metadata about different regions and geographies and brands, and we had to import the data at an ad group level, which is incredibly granular, particularly because this is a company that was running millions in ad spend a month. So this data set got really big really quickly. Tried to connect the dashboarding tool direct to that ad group level data, the dashboard performance would have suffered. So in that particular case, we had to work with the data and pre-aggregate it outside the visualization tool before we could even connect it to the visualization tool. A second issue would be the number of joins you have to do across your data. I have a case study where we were doing 63 different joins, which is not something that you would expect your data visualization tool to actually be able to handle. So as that number of joins starts to increase, that's when you're going to think about making sure you're doing those joins outside of the data visualization tool. And the final issues, they really relate to human resources. Some of the different data models, like building out a database or accessing APIs, they can take quite a bit of resources across different teams in order to enable. And if you're talking about creating scripts to access APIs, you could be looking at specialized programmers or developer resources. So depending on how big your dashboarding project is, you could require additional staff or expertise in order just to get it implemented. So we have two case studies to help demonstrate how consideration of the data model is critical to effective dashboard execution. The first one is for a sports footwear company, and in this case we needed to pull data from these 63 different Google Analytics profiles in order to provide updated data to brand and regional managers 3 times a day, which is a high frequency. And this one really nicely illustrates Mark's point about the needs for a consistent taxonomy. And the reason why we had to do 63 different joins instead of just using a single global analytics roll-up is because the different websites didn't all use the same taxonomy. So some of the key data points that we needed to access were not comparable across the different views. So we had to use an ETL tool, extract, transform, and load, to pull the data in, clean it up, reorganize it, and then push the updated data set. In this case, it was going up to Tableau Online. What made this project really nice in the end, once we went through this whole process, is we got it 100% automated. So the data is pulled out from Google Analytics and pushed up into Tableau Online just on a scheduled process 3 times a day, no human intervention required. As a second example, we took a look at one of our clients' weekly and monthly dashboards. This was a process that we had inherited that took a lot of time in order to execute the dashboards, and it was taking away from our ability to develop insights and analysis for this particular client. So what we did is we just completely changed the execution process. For the weekly dashboards, the data visualization tool was changed so that it didn't require manual pulls of data. Instead, we went with something that connected directly to the web analytics platform. And this allowed the stakeholders to access more or less real-time data whenever they required without coming to us for the ongoing execution. And then on the monthly dashboard side, we went a different route. This would be an example of a client who had a very strong taxonomy on their site. So we were able to build out a single international level dashboard, but when it came to delivering that dashboard to the different regional stakeholders, we just filtered the data so only the countries and regions that were of interest were displayed. So it was one dashboard execution, but just with an easy filtering step to customize the dashboard for each of the different audiences. And the only way we could build out the dashboard dashboard in this way is because the underlying data was completely uniform across the different international websites. So we thought we'd also mention a few of the forgotten value adds that can help make your dashboard just a little bit more usable. The first one is really simply context. So it's just about helping your stakeholders understand if the metrics they're looking at are any good. A good way of doing this is comparing your current year's numbers to last year's numbers. It could be comparing actuals to targets. It could be comparing your results to your competitors' results. So just anything you can do to make sure that the numbers actually have meaning. The second one, leading indicators. Many dashboards you see are in fact just operational in nature and just reflect past performance. But in some cases it can help to include leading indicators to show where performance can be expected to go. So as an example, a solid leading indicator for university enrollments is the unemployment rate. So that's relevant to the education industry. And this can help provide stakeholders with information on what's to come. Third forgotten tool, highlights. So this is where you as an analyst are calling attention to the metrics that really matter so they don't get overlooked by your stakeholders. You can do this through the use of color, through annotations, or even through animation. Fourth is identifying your data sources. I see this question all the time. The first question that comes from stakeholders when they look at the dashboard is just where is this data coming from? So once they know what the data source is, they'll be able to understand the metrics just a little bit better, which tends to lead to a bit of a better buy-in. And finally, just having a contact. If a person has questions about the dashboard or they want to make a change request, who do they contact? In a large organization where dashboards may be posted online, this can be really, really helpful. So as a nice dashboarding example that kind of illustrates a couple of those points, this would be a competition winner from a competition that was hosted by Stephen Few. And what it is it's showing you the performance of students in a math class. So first thing it does really well is it provides effective context. You can see what a student's current grade was, but you can also see what their target grade is supposed to be and how well they did last year. So you're not just seeing a number in isolation, you're seeing a number with an associated context that lets you better understand whether or not this performance is good. Another thing this dashboard is doing well is in the top left you'll see 2 red dots, and those red dots represent students who are really underperforming. So what it's doing is it's immediately calling your attention to something that you need to be paying attention to, a critical metric. And then just overall, the design is just fantastic. It's got a really consistent color scheme and the font structure. It looks really, really good. If you are interested in more dashboard usability resources, data visualization best practices is a massive topic, and there's a lot of resources online. Stefan had mentioned Stephen Few, and these are the links that we've actually put here are to some of his dashboarding white papers that go a little bit deeper on how to effectively represent numbers and visualization of metrics. And I'm pretty sure the Cardinal Path team will be sending these links out on Twitter. So overall, the big key takeaways we wanted you to take away here, Stefan had mentioned about how strategic alignment is really, really essential to getting organizational buy-in. Mark was talking about data governance, which is really important to making sure you have quality data. And then I had mentioned some different points about having an effective data structure can really help improve on your dashboard and your dashboard execution. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Charlotte. So lots and lots of good information, and now let's put it into context by taking some questions and getting you some answers. The first couple of questions are for you, Stefan. Someone writes, we have a lack of non-vanity goals / objectives from our stakeholders. They want too much data. How do you arrive at a consensus on dashboard priorities?
Yeah, that's an interesting question and a good challenge also. I remember working with a client where initially they wanted to have a very sophisticated dashboard linking to a lot of different data sources, a bit like what Charlotte was explaining. And the way we managed to manage the risk and bring also some more governance at the same time and identify the right KPIs is we came up with an approach where we said, okay, we understand the need, we understand what you want to achieve, but let's start with a pilot project. And what happened is by the end of the pilot project, basically we chunked the whole complex thing into small parts, and it was much more manageable. And what happened is the vision they had initially turned out to be very, very different from what happened as a result of the pilot project. And so my advice would be to really start with maybe, even if it has to be just a single KPI, and agree on a single thing. So back to a focus on, let's take just one thing at a time. Do we agree on this single KPI? Maybe you'll have to break it even further and say, without saying it's a KPI, do we agree that this metric is meaningful and important? It doesn't matter if it's a KPI or not. If you can represent that and it's useful for the business, that's great. You've made progress. At least there's something, right? So I'm a fervent advocate of saying, let's break it into smaller parts and do iteration, be more agile, and reduce the risk, more knowledge, and know how things are evolving. I think that would be a good start.
Okay, so the next question is a kind of a tie-in. How do you identify the difference between nice to know and actionable data?
Yeah. I think the actionable, well, it goes back again to the same what I was mentioning about if you've gone through the exercise of defining your objectives early on in the process, the question won't even be asked. The reality is oftentimes it's kind of too late. We have to deliver something. Actionable data is, it really depends back on the 5 W's plus H that I was mentioning. Who is the audience and why do they need it and how they're going to use it? So what is nice to know for one stakeholder might be critical for another stakeholder. So I don't think there's any easy solution to that because it needs to be customized to your audience, even if it means eventually that you would have to create multiple dashboards because your stakeholder has different interests and different level of experience and needs that they want to solve. If you go at the higher executive levels, those managers should be aligned on common objective. And at the end of the day, there's just 3 ultimate KPIs, and I like to mention that. There's ultimately only 3 KPI. It's either you can increase revenue, either you can reduce costs, and those 2 becomes profitability. And the third KPI ultimately is satisfaction, be it customer satisfaction, investor, employees, and so on. And when you combine satisfaction with profitability, you end up with sustainability, meaning that you're going to be in business for the long term. So everything you show, any KPI should eventually lead to higher profit, reduce costs, and satisfaction. There's nothing else. And everything it needs to contribute to one of those 3, ultimately.
Right. Thanks, Stefan. So Mark, this question is for you. The question is, I'm using Google Data Studio and trying to bring all sources, web analytics, email metrics, industry ad data, and social media engagement all together into a dashboard. Any advice or experience on doing this?
Yeah, totally. So this is actually perfect timing because there are basically two ways you can go about doing this. Google just announced, it was on the 22nd, so 2 days ago, that they have released a connector to the Google Cloud SQL database and the MySQL database connector. So the traditional way of connecting data to Data Studio has been through connectors. So thinking back to Charlotte's data models previously in the webinar, they had the direct connection. So you have your data source and you have your data visualization tool. And this is great for something that is Google related. So Google Analytics, Google AdWords, Google Plus, things like that. But if you have any data that you can't directly connect, there's always ways around that. So whether it's using a Google Sheet to pull your data in, or it's using this new MySQL server connector, you can either set up an automated process to get data into there to then bring it back into Data Studio. So whether you want to go the direct connector route, or you want to use Google Sheets or BigQuery, I forgot to mention, or MySQL as a proxy for it, it's just all about as long as you have good data quality, bringing it all in via either a database or a direct connector.
Perfect. So Charlotte, the next question is for you. What tool besides Tableau can you recommend that allows you to pull in social and web analytics data side by side? And this person also adds that the trouble with Tableau is that it's hard to share dashboards since licenses are required to even view these reports.
Okay, so I'm going to break that into two. One is the Tableau licensing question, and then one is the pulling social and web analytics question. Yeah, so I think the question to ask is, do you have technical expertise in-house? Because that opens up different options to you in terms of how you pull the data down. So I have described how we're running R and Python scripts against APIs, and you can completely automate those particular processes, but you need to have the developers on hand. So let's pretend you don't have the developers on hand. There's a whole host of mainly Excel-based tools which allow you to have access to different API endpoints. So off the top of my head, you can look at like the Supermetrics, the Excellent Analytics. Analytics Canvas is one that we use quite a bit here. We like it because it gives you access to different Google Analytics APIs, namely the Management API, which allows us to pull unsampled reports. So those are a couple, and each of those also have different connection points to different social analytics platforms as well. The other point there was about Tableau and the licensing. So you definitely need a Tableau desktop license, which has a bit of a cost associated with it for dashboard creation, but the Tableau Reader is free. So anyone should be able to download Tableau Reader for free, and they should be able to have all the same functionality in terms of filters and drill downs that you have built into your dashboard. So just keep in mind the difference between the dashboard creation, because that's the cost license, and the dashboard viewing, that's the free license.
Okay, another one for you, Charlotte. We have many data sources, so the big obstacle is automating the data extracts while not yet having a centralized and managed data mart.
Yes, yes. You can easily spiral a dashboard project into this massive data mart project to support the underlying visualizations. So I guess it comes back to two things, and the one is, what can you automate in terms of the data sources you have available to you, and then is there anything you can do on the automation side given the visualization tools that you're using? And somewhere between the two, if there's still a gap, that's when you'd rely on some sort of ETL tool. So maybe an example, let's say you're working with Adobe Analytics, you can automate and schedule the output of reports from Adobe Analytics into CSVs, and maybe you just want to do a one-step refresh. Let's say you're using Tableau hypothetically to update the underlying CSV. If you needed to join the data in some sort of complicated way, that's when you'd put that intermediary ETL step, the extract, transform, and load step, in between those two processes. And using, if so, gap analysis, what can the data source do, what can the visualization platform do, is there still a gap, and then you'd bring in another piece of software then.
Okay, so staying on the topic of ETL, what are some examples of companies that provide ETL, or extract, transform, and load software?
I would actually be interested if Stefan can give me a few suggestions here. There's definitely a few that we are really reliant on here in Cardinal Path, that being programmatic options like your R and Python scripts. Analytics Canvas would be one. Alteryx is another one I see in use commonly with Tableau, but Stefan may have some other suggestions.
Yeah, I've used Analytics Canvas quite a bit because it's kind of a more in a way simpler, but also more specialized tool for Google Analytics. So that's an easy one to use. Otherwise, I've used Talend and Pentao, and I'm pretty sure both of them are actually open source. So you can give it a try. They tend to be a little more complex. If you are a marketer that is not used to a lot of data manipulation, SQL statements and stuff, they might be a little more complex. Then, of course, like you mentioned, Charlotte, if you go with Python scripts and stuff like that, then there's obviously some coding to do. But you have full control over what's going on.
Thanks, Stefan. Another one for you, Stefan, because you mentioned this earlier in the presentation. Several people have said they're struggling with managing the needs of multiple stakeholders for a single dashboard. What's your advice?
Well, you know, I mentioned Stephen's definition of what is a dashboard, and he mentioned, you know, a single page or a single screen. And I think, like anything else, you know, it's a rule of thumb, and your mileage may vary. So I think what's important is it doesn't really matter if you end up with multiple KPIs of management and the amount of work that you're going to put into it. But what's critical is if you show some KPI on a dashboard, it needs to be consistent across all of the dashboards so that all the stakeholders have exactly the same information they need. On the other hand, I would be tempted to say it's probably better to, in most cases, it's better to maybe have a larger, bigger dashboard, and allow the stakeholders to focus on the KPIs they want and the information they want, but still be exposed to the other KPIs and the other metrics that are important to their peers and their other managers that they work with. I think that creates more synergies and opportunities to uncover, oh, look at that, my KPI is going up in marketing, but sales are going down, what's going on? And you might have different stakeholders with different opinions and different ideas on what is going on and finding a solution. So I would be tempted to, at the risk of having a larger dashboard, but try to bring everyone on the same page. You know that expression, bring everyone on the same page? Well, that's your single dashboard.
All right. So Charlotte, was the student performance dashboard created using a standard tool such as Tableau? And if not, can you give an indication as to how many organizations choose to create their own visualization from scratch as opposed to using a tool like Tableau?
Yeah, that's a super good question. So I think one of the reasons why that dashboard looks so good is it was done in Photoshop by a graphic designer. And that's part of the reason he partially won, because he selected an incredibly efficient data visualization design, but he also won because it looked really, really good. So I definitely would not recommend that you go forward with Photoshop on your organization and building out your dashboards. When it comes to the question of, sorry, Michelle, can you repeat the second question?
Yeah, so if not, can you give an indication as to how many organizations create their own visualization from scratch as opposed to using a tool like Tableau?
Yeah, I think the majority that we're seeing are relying on some sort of data visualization tool. There are a few people still doing your Excel-based dashboards. If you are working with data with any level of complexity, though, you will know how error-prone those can be and how time-consuming they can be to get out the door. And it's a little bit of a trade-off. Do you want to make the investment in having a person who's spending their time putting that dashboard together, or do you want to put the investment into a data visualization tool that allow you to save time? So the question is just, you know, where you want to spend that particular part of your budget.
Great, thank you. Mark, this next question is for you. I'm using Google Analytics, but before plugging the data into my dashboards, I need to modify them using Excel CSV. Do you know if there's a way for the data to be automatically modified before I plug them into my dashboard?
Yeah, great question, Michelle. We've mentioned it a lot on this webinar, but Analytics Canvas is definitely the tool that I would look towards for any sort of transformations, especially using Google Analytics data. So I mean, it all does depend on the kinds of transformations you're wanting to make. But if you can do it in Excel, very likely, you know, you can do it within Analytics Canvas, save yourself a lot of work. So I'd say if that's your challenge, then definitely look into getting an Analytics Canvas license.
Anything to add to that, Stefan?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. Skip Excel completely and use Analytics Canvas. It's going to be a lot easier and automated.
Perfect, thanks. All right, we have time for one more question, and this is a pretty general question, but I believe that it's pertaining to dashboards in general. Does Cardinal Path offer this software? And Charlotte, maybe you can handle this one.
Sorry, offer this software, the software being?
Well, all of the software that we've sort of been talking about today, primarily Tableau.
Do we offer services related to the software? Yes. Do we offer the software themselves? You would go to the vendors for the software in question.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna stop with the questions there. We will answer the remainder of questions via email. I'd like to thank Charlotte, Mart, and Stefan for sharing your knowledge today. As promised, we will follow up with you, send you a link to the webinar recording and any other resources that we mentioned in the webinar today. We'll also put together a summary of the Q&A so that you have an at-a-glance reference point. And if you're interested in building up your Tableau dashboard skills, Cardinal Path's Training Academy has an online Tableau workshop taking place August 30th. It's a 4-hour intensive course and it costs $349. All webinar registrants may use the code SUMMER to save 25%. And as always, if you have any other questions or you'd like help with your dashboard strategy, contact us at info@cardinalpath.com. Appreciate you all taking the time to join us for this session. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.